We are live here from Yellow Brick Road Farm, and we've just been out here eyeing up the lumber. We've got a new barn going up this week. We've been watching the horses play. Oh, there they go again. They're the herd boss, little April, is bossing them all around. So anyway, they're happy to be outside after a very windy, rainy day yesterday. I didn't know if we'd get to do this today because if the wind was too bad, you wouldn't be able to hear me. So, but I think it's okay. So we're gonna go ahead. It's gonna be a little bit shorter one today. We've got an appointment after this. So anyway, yeah, so it's Jennifer here from Yellow Brick Road Farm, and we are talking gardening. Edible gardening for kids is starting today. Sorry, we've started. We are in episode 5. We are session 5 of edible gardening for kids and families and anyone else who wants to listen. I am game to chat with anyone. So basically, we've talked about the ducks. We've met the ducks. We've met the horses. We've met the sheep, and we've talked about them. Today we're going to go get some eggs out of the hen house, and we're going to go do that in a little bit. So because I've got some things that I'm going to do in the garden with their eggshells, and I want to talk about that. So first off, we're going to go over here, and we are going to look in at this wheelbarrow and garden fork that I've got there. Okay, so this wheelbarrow and garden fork, we're talking mulches today. So we're talking mulches, we're talking all of the things that can help with keeping weeds down in the garden, okay? So if you're smart now, you won't have to weed very much later on. A cat. So if you're smart, you won't have to weed very much later on. So anyway, we're going to chat about that. So it's Jennifer from Yellow Brick Road Farm, and we're talking about mulches. So I'm just going to follow me in here. So this is leftover bedding from the sheep, and I had cleaned out their stall and I let it set out because I really wanted it to get nice and wet and heavy. So I've already put some in the garden. So this is straw. Now, the difference between straw and hay, okay, is that straw is hollow. Okay, so straw is hollow and it absorbs water and it doesn't have the seeds in it. So basically that means that, you know, the straw can sit in your garden and it's not really going to put any weeds into your garden. It's not going to add anything except for holding water in. So that's going to hold water in your garden better. So that's what mulches do. So they keep weeds down and they keep water holding into your garden for that, what's that word that we learned in our first session? Aquifer. So we've only got 3 more sessions of edible gardening for kids, and I really want to get into the last little bit of how you can take your garden right through to harvest and have, a weed-free and enjoyable, great start to your garden, okay? So before sort of summer hits and you're in the throes of everything. So we want to get that garden in the ground. So it's Jennifer from Yellow Brick Road Farm, and we are talking gardening today. Gardening, edible gardening for kids and families, getting the garden ready, getting those in there. So we're going to come over here, and we're going to go in the garden now. And so we're going to go over here. Everything is still a bit muddy, a bit messy. So I've had to lay my trees down. So we're talking about mulching. So when we're talking about mulching, so Luke, you can sort of span that what I'm standing on here. So when we talk about mulching is a way that we can keep the weeds down, keep some water in our garden longer, but also it's got to add something to the garden, okay? So we want it to actually not be like black plastic, or we want it to be something that when it breaks down, it's going to add to the garden. So we want it to be like an organic matter, okay? Come on. And we want it to be like an organic matter. So what I've done is I've left this cardboard out. I've taken all the tape off it and all the staples out of it. I've left this out so it can get nice and wet, okay? And I've put it down in the garden. Now what I'm going to do, you can see I've done it here, okay? I've taken the straw and the old bedding, okay? And this has a little bit of pine chips in it, and that's fine. I just don't want it to be nice, too dry, because then it's just going to blow all over the place and blow in the garden. So I've done this, I put this here, and I have spread it all out, and I'm gonna try to keep it off my rows, just because I want to make the best use of it in here. And I can weed the rows, but sometimes I will tell you that right around August, okay, kiddos, you want to do I know that most of you want to do the least amount of work as possible. I know my son does. My kids do. All of them, actually. So, you know, and so do I. I want to make the most of my summer. I don't want to have to spend it all weeding. I do try to get out at least once a day and weed the garden, because then it doesn't get so overwhelming. So you want to make sure that you get out there at least 10 minutes a day and get in the garden. I know some days are super busy. It might not be this summer because of COVID and the lockdown, but maybe you know, maybe that might be over by then. Fingers crossed. But if it's not, you know, you may have a little bit more time to spend, and you'll get to see how easy it is to stay on top of like weeding and things like that. Now, if you've got a raised bed, you are going to be able to weed even quicker, and you won't have to worry so much about you know, this cardboard and straw in between your rows and things like that. But yeah, if you've got a bed in the ground, you definitely want to get some preventative measures in place, and you want to spend some time doing that. The other thing that I use for mulch, okay, right here, okay, is some newspaper. So wet some newspaper, okay, and put that down. Now I'm picking up some bark mulch today, so I can also use wood here in between the rows in my garden, okay, and that's going to break down lovely as well. So I am going to use some wood and put that wood in here, put the wood chips in here, and that's going to actually look really nice, I think, to be on top of the newspaper. Some people really you know, swear by just black and white newspaper. To be honest, this doesn't have a lot of color on it. I wouldn't use like a really glossy newspaper that you know, has a lot of colors in it, just because you remember whatever you put in your garden is going to go into your food, okay? So some of those inks may not be the best, you know, for your food. So basically we're talking about mulching here today. So I've talked about putting down cardboard, putting straw on top of it in between my rows, you know, and in between my plants. We've got a duck attack there, duck attacking a chicken. So then we have also, I have the newspaper here, and I'm putting bark mulch on top of that. The other thing that I've used, and you may not have access to this, is wool. So I've used wool from my sheep, and I've actually done this around my raspberries in particular. So I have actually taken wool, discarded wool, because not always all the wool can be used. Some of it's dirty from the back end of the sheep, and it's called skirting. So once I skirt the wool, step on the lettuce. Yes, lettuce. I had to look at the tag. So once I skirt the wool, I use the wool in the garden. That's completely organic. That'll break down in the garden as well. It'll turn into you know, it'll last for a long time, but it's a great mulch as well. So I'm sure that everybody has access to some leaves. Maybe if you find some leaves and you get a great big pile of leaves, you can take your lawnmower and run it over top of the leaves quite a few times. Get your dad to do that, or you can do that if you're a little older. And you know, you can you know, or get a family member, an older brother or sister, whoever, to run the lawnmower over top of the leaves, okay? And that's going to chop those leaves up into really fine pieces. That can be spread in between your rows as well. So you want to look for like cheap and easy things. You may not have access to bedding or straw. Okay, you may not have access, you probably have access to newspaper, but you may not want to spend some money on wood chips, okay? And you might not have access to them. So if you can do this, and you might not have access to wool. So you want to use what you have, okay? Use what you have, run the lawnmower over a pile of leaves and use that. Put that in between. It's going to save you a lot of time with weeding later on, okay? So we want to make sure that we do some preventative work right now so that we're not overwhelmed when everything starts growing. And trust me, it happens. Like, there are days that I have come out and looked at my garden and been so tired to think I have to weed, okay? Because I have a huge garden. So, the more that I can do to prevent weeding, the better. So, anyway, yeah, so the other thing that we did this week was we made some garden markers. So I've planted beets here, so I'm going to put those in here. Put those in. So those are done, and I just wanted to make something fun. So I did those. I'd love to see some of your garden markers if you made them. I would love to see that. Okay, so send me some pictures if you'd like. That would be awesome. So the other thing, so we've got some cabbage in, I've put some leeks in, I've got some beets in, I've got some lettuce in. Yep, I've got some lettuce in, I've got some onions in, I've got shallots in, I've got my potatoes. Oh my goodness, I planted, if all goes well, everybody, I should have about 400 pounds of potatoes, okay? So every single potato plant will give you 2 to 3 pounds of potatoes, okay? If you let them have enough space, okay? So you want it, they like it nice and dark, so you want to plant that potato nice and deep in the ground, hill it up. And you're going to continue to keep hilling those potatoes, remember, as they grow. You're going to keep hilling over. You never want to see that root. Okay, so keep hilling up the ground around the potato plant, and that's called hilling, and you want to make sure that you do that and get that up there. Your potatoes are going to be coming up in roughly probably 65, 70 days, okay? So, you're going to have a little bit. It depends on what variety you planted. So that's going to be exciting. You're going to have some potatoes, so we'll have some potatoes coming up. Like I say, I planted quite a few, and then I'm going to plant a bit more in a few days, some more, another week or so, because I want to stagger my harvest, okay? So basically, I have got some pine berries that I got from a friend, and they're being transplanted in the garden, and some rhubarb. So what's the difference between perennials and annuals? So annuals, you might hear that word a lot. So perennials are things that do not have to be planted every single year. So things like rhubarb, okay, you'll see over here. So over here, we have some rhubarb that I've transplanted. Get a better crop of rhubarb going. So I've transplanted it into a better spot and taken some from another spot. So ideally, I would have done this in the fall, but that's in a perfect world, and that doesn't always happen. So the rhubarb is going to go in a better spot. Rhubarb doesn't need a lot to grow, though. You can see all the grass growing all up in it and everything. And look at these nice big roots on it, though. It's going to grow really well. Rhubarb will come up every year. Okay, so rhubarb comes back every single year as long as I treat it well. And so that is what's called a perennial. Okay, so that comes back year after year. Blueberry bushes, strawberry bushes, until they have to be replaced, okay? So generally you get about 5 years out of a perennial fruit bush. So raspberry canes, grapevines, blackberries, let's see, but we've had some grapevines. You can see I'm rooting some grapevines here. We've had some grapevines on our family farm for, oh my goodness, 100 years. So, and as long as they're taken care of, like, cut back, grown up in a good spot, they have to be able to climb. So I'm rooting some of those to put in. I've got some that I had planted last year as well, because my goal is to always, stay ahead of them. So some perennials can come back year after year after year. Raspberry canes as well. Okay, like I said, mentioned the pine berries. So they will come back every year. I've got some blueberry bushes over here, and I've got 5 blueberry bushes planted now. I'm going to put in another 5 this year, and another 5 the year after that. Because what I want to do is continuously be staggering that that harvest, right? So, you know, that's just kind of that's what perennials are. When you hear the word perennials, it means you don't have to plant it every year. It's going to come back every year. So chives are another one. Mint is another one, okay? But when I have to buy seeds, or I have to buy seed potatoes, and I have to plant peas and beets and things like that, those are called annuals, okay? So those are annuals, and that is something that has to be planted every year, okay? So annuals have to be planted every year. So think of a calendar. You have to get a new calendar every year, an annual calendar, okay? That is why they're called annuals. So every year you will plant those vegetables or fruits again. They are called annuals, and they need to be done every year. Perennials will come back, but you may only get about 5 years out of a perennial bush. It depends on what it is, but usually you can get 5 to 10 years, you know, before production starts to really drop off. And you want to, like, you know, you want to make sure you're giving that plant the best it can for those 5 years, and it might give you longer. And remember, plants can't move. So plants can't move themselves to find what they need. You have to take what they need and bring it to them. Okay? So if you're going to plant something, you have to bring what they need to them. Okay? So that's just something that you can, you know. So I've planted some mums over here. You can see the mums are starting to come up. I've planted some seeds. I've got some mum seeds. You know, they're coming up now. Because I've planted some flowers. We talked about bee pollinators last week. We talked about pollinators in the garden, and making sure we have lots of flowers in the garden. So we talked about that. So I've got some mums coming up. I'm pretty excited about that. And the garlic, I've got the cold frame open today. It's getting a little warmer. I want to make sure that it gets grows a little more. Garlic is coming up beautifully. So I've got lots of garlic coming up right there. Yep, and we can see all the pea shoots are coming up. Okay, so 2 great big rows of peas. I've got those coming up as well. So that's all doing very well in the garden. I've got some lettuce coming up. I've got some, is that the timer? Oh my goodness, goes fast this time, doesn't it? All right, this time we have together. It's a little bit shorter of an episode today because we've got to jot off. But I want to talk to you about a kids scavenger hunt as well. So I want you to go out, and actually this is a scavenger hunt that kids, I want you to put together for your family. Okay, or parents, you can do it for your kids, whichever, I don't care. But I want you to go out, get into the garden, go and look in the garden, find some things. So if I put on there, you know, find a mussel shell. And I know that right here, I have a mussel shell from my garden compost that I found. So that might be something that you might not find in your garden. But really take a good hard look at it and list all those items that you see. So find a piece of wool, find a rock, a white rock, find a piece of straw, find a bird, find I can hear a bird calling over there. I can find all of those. Find a seed, anything like that. So I want you to take a clipboard, write down everything that you've got there, write down everything and that you can find, and give that list to your family and make them go find it. So this is a garden scavenger hunt. You're in charge, and if they're a very competitive family, my husband is super competitive. I am not, but anyway, I would put him on a timed scavenger hunt. Okay, I would put him on a timed scavenger hunt. I would say, go find it in this amount of time. So I would do that, and my son is, they tend to be a little competitive as well. So I would tell them to go find it in the least amount of time. Whoever finds it first wins. So that is a little bit about the garden today. We also, something else there. Oh, if I could only grow one vegetable, what would it be? I'll tell you what it would be. Tomatoes. If I could only grow, and it's actually fruit, but if I could only grow one, so I could cheat a little bit, I could pick 2. So if I could only grow one thing, I would grow tomatoes, okay? If you could only grow one thing in your garden, what vegetable would it be? Carrots? Yeah. So if you could only grow, we still have to get the eggs. So if you could only grow one thing in the garden, what would it be? I would grow tomatoes. For sure, I would grow tomatoes. They are the most versatile. They're the thing we eat most often. They're the basis of salsa. They're the basis of spaghetti sauce. I use them in all kinds of dishes. We use them to make taco sauce. We use them for everything. So if I could grow one vegetable, and there is nothing, and I mean nothing, people, like a tomato fresh out of the garden, warm from the sun, to put a little salt on and sink your teeth into. That is how I learned to eat them when I was young with my Grandpa Jackson out of his garden. In Shelburne, I used to go out in his garden and we would eat carrots, wipe the dirt off them, pick them out of the garden, wipe the dirt off them, eat them away, and we would do the same thing with tomatoes. So, one thing we're going to talk about, the last thing we're going to talk about, I should say, is eggs. So these are eggs that we've collected here from the farm. I have 50 laying hens right now. Okay, I have 50 laying hens, and they provide us with all the eggs that we need, plus we sell some. You'll remember last week one of my egg customers showed up. So basically these eggshells, so I don't like to waste a single bit of the eggs. I don't like to waste a single bit of the, of anything we produce on the farm, because that's not taking really good care of anything if you waste it. So basically I use, we talked about pests, we talked about gardening actually, about the saving you some time. So another way to save time is to save the eggshells from your eggs, and even if they're store-bought eggs, it doesn't matter. Well, it does, but I'd rather you had garden eggs, fresh eggs. But anyway, if that's all you have, if you have eggs you want to dry them out, okay, so rinse them, dry out the eggshells on a windowsill, crush them up, okay, and you're going to save those eggshells, because when you get ready to plant your tomatoes, you're going to put some eggshells in the hole where you plant your tomatoes, okay, and that's going to give extra calcium to your tomatoes to grow, okay, but it's also going to do something for pests. So if you have some pests in your garden and you don't want to spend all the time picking all of the things off of your plants, you're actually going to take some of those crushed eggshells and sprinkle them in amongst your plants. And the pests that are there, they will cut their bellies on the eggshells and they will go away. Okay, so they will not they will tell all their bug friends and they won't come back. Okay, so you can do that, because slugs are a big problem here, especially where it's wet. We have a really big problem with slugs. So I tend to put some eggshells in the garden to get rid of to deter the slugs. It's uncomfortable for them to slug around the garden with eggshells underneath of them. So I use eggshells for a number of different things. We have, definitely don't want to waste any little bit of the egg or anything around the farm, okay? So that is a little tip for you for today. And next week we will have baby chicks here on the farm. So just wanted to let you know that next week we will be visiting our baby chicks in the brooder, and we will hopefully have a little bit more time next week. So it's Jennifer from Yellow Brick Road Farm, and I'm really excited that session 5, we're diving into mulches and annuals versus perennials, okay? Garden scavenger hunt. I want you to start thinking of ways that you can save time, save money by going natural in the garden and you reusing things that you have in your house to deter pests and to save you time later on, okay? The other thing that I want you to do is think about, if you could only grow one vegetable, what would it be? Okay? Mine's tomatoes. Again, I love tomatoes. All right, everybody, I'm signing off. I'll see you next week when we're going to see all the baby chicks, and we are going to do definitely some more planting next week. We're going to get right in there when it's a little warmer and a little less dreary, and we'll definitely see some more action after these next few sunny days in the garden. All right, everybody, Jennifer from Yellow Brick Road Farm. We'll see you next week.